What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video here. We have a lot to discuss in this one as we get into what is most likely going to be another very eventful trading week next week. We're going to be covering some of the most relevant pieces of economic data that were released to us this past week, and as always, covering some of the most relevant pieces of news and the charts of some of your favorite names here: Tesla, Palantir, Sofi, and Neo, to give you guys a better picture of what is most likely to happen next in the short term. So before we get into all of that information, guys, if you guys do enjoy the information and analysis that I provide for you guys in these videos here, make sure you go down and hit that like button. Costs you nothing to do it, but it helps me out a whole lot in spreading this information out to as many people who actually want to learn. And again, make sure you're subscribed and turn on notifications so you're notified every time these videos do end up getting posted live. And as always, massive shout out to all of the members of my private trading and investing community, Less Trades, More Profits. I'm going to throw some of the game screenshots up on the screen right now. Guys, you guys have been absolutely crushing it there. Congratulations to everybody in there with us. For those of you guys that want to hop in, remember, I am running the best sale that I will ever offer. Use code JUNE with the links down below there to get 50% off your first 2 months to the group. It literally only comes out to $1 a day. You get access to all the full-length educational curriculum videos, the full watch list of stocks and cryptos that are about to explode before they do, the pre-market plans, the daily private live streams, the macro research reports, single stock research reports, the weekly market research reports. Guys, there is so much in there. If you guys want to take full advantage of what the market has to offer, make sure you take advantage of that, because again, at the end of the month, we are going waitlist only and closing off to the public. So let's get into this first kind of round of economic data here that we have to talk about. What the market was really waiting on throughout this entire week was non-farm payrolls, or NFP. So U.S. labor May non-farm payrolls rose 139,000, with the consensus estimate being around 125,000. So the labor market added more jobs than what the market was actually expecting. In the U.S. May unemployment rate stayed steady at 4.2% here. Again, it was really since the middle of last year, the unemployment rate has been ticking around between 4.1 and 4.2%. Remember, the Fed's dual mandate is price stability and maximum employment. Seeing inflation continuously moving to the downside is a good thing, but in order for the Federal Reserve to really get on the side of rate cuts, especially with the stance that they've taken going into this year, that they think inflation is going to start moving back to the upside aggressively as a result of all of these new trade policies, again, they are going to need to see unemployment tick up more than what they are seeing right now in order to move on interest rates. And that is exactly why we are seeing the probabilities for interest rate cuts going into the end of this year here. Again, we're looking at December. Currently, the current target rate is 425 to 450 basis points, which just effectively means 4.25% to 4.5%. And when we take a look at how these probabilities have really changed over the last week here, we did see some shifting around to the market projecting a little bit higher of a probability for 3 rate cuts at one point over this last week here. But in general, over the last week, we have seen those probabilities for 3 rate cuts moving down, and the probabilities for 2 rate cuts here remaining relatively flat. So we saw those probabilities move down for those 2 rate cuts at one point, and then they started to move back up. So really no change there on the projections for Fed cuts just yet here. And then again, just thinking about overall positioning here, positioning got even lighter this week with indices moving higher. You have heard individuals like Tom Lee, who we're actually going to hear from on his Tesla comments in a little bit, talking about this being one of the most hated rallies in the market here, as investors are still very uncertain over what is going to happen next with a lot of these trade talks and any other new information and new deals and new policies and new regulations that are going to be coming out of this new administration. Remember, something that we've been talking about a lot here as well is that flight out of U.S. assets from foreign investors here in the first and second quarters of 2025. We can see that reflected in the dollar. We have talked a lot about that on the live streams here and in the YouTube videos. At some point, we are going to see that money start to fly back into U.S. markets, but in order for that to happen, we need to see, again, a lot more clarity on where we are headed next, not only with these new trade deals, but also with any other fiscal stimulus that this new administration is going to try and send into the system. Now, we also have a positive catalyst watch as we get into this next week as well. After this new announcement here, I am pleased to announce that Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, and United States Trade Representative Ambassador Jamieson Greer will be meeting in London on Monday, June 9th with representatives of China with reference to the trade deal. The meeting should go very well. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, the last time that we saw these trade talks with China and we got the announcements from them, the market reacted very positively. Now, just taking a look at the broad market here. Again, we were outlining this zone here for all of you guys that were attending the public streams that I've started back up. Again, this prior all-time high zone here on the S&P 500 is going to be a very critical area to get above. And again, if we do see a lot of those positive trade developments, we easily could see these buyers step back up. Again, with positioning light, money still that needs to get reinvested back into equities. We could then see a lot of these investors continue to chase the market higher. And in addition, we also have CPI coming out this week as well. With the overall market, the Federal Reserve, and a lot of these economists still watching to see if inflation is going to start moving back to the upside here. If we do end up seeing low CPI, we easily could see those rate cut expectations start to move up, and that could easily add some more confidence for investors to place money back into United States markets, again, further sending markets higher. Now, let's start talking about these individual names here, and obviously we need to start with Tesla here. Now, again, everybody kind of understands what was happening on X over the last week here with that dispute between Elon Musk and Donald Trump here after Elon's departure from Doge. And one thing that I want to make very clear here about Tesla, and it was a question that I was getting asked a lot in the streams, in private messages here, is what to do with Tesla in the short term here. Now, I know a lot of you guys like to take advantage of a lot of these moves in the market with options, and I'll tell you guys right now, when these situations happen, when you see significantly increased volatility on individual names, that is the time where you do not touch any options in terms of buying them. The implied volatility is going to be through the roof. You're effectively putting your hand on a hot stove and expecting not to get burnt. Now, what I will say is that with that implied volatility, this could be a good time to start selling options on Tesla here. But again, just want to make that clear to everybody. When you see these big situations happen in the market, it is usually a good time to take a step back and wait for things to develop and not make any rash decisions in the present here. Now, Tesla is holding that 200 exponential moving average here, but at the end of the day, you always have to think about Tesla, in my opinion here, as a car company. When you think about how Tesla is generating their revenues here and what is going to allow them to get into all of these different sectors, kind of AI, robotics, and everything like that, again, their car sales and vehicle sales are going to be what is going to allow them to operate in those markets there and drive that kind of growth. Now, Tom Lee also has some very interesting insights on what is happening with Tesla right now, so let's also hear from him on what his thoughts are in this short clip.
So it looks like things are cooling off on Elon Musk's side, but there was a lot of damage to Tesla shareholders. It started with Elon's tweet about the Epstein files. Tesla, which has been down roughly 7% from its highs, fell 14% almost immediately after that tweet. And that's because investors thought this was actually taking this to a new level. And of course, I think Tesla investors are used to this. But if you take a step back and look at Tesla from its 2010 to now, when it went from $1 to $280 today, that decline that we're seeing recently really looks like it's just coming back to support. So I don't think the long-term picture really has changed all that much for Tesla.
So obviously Tom Lee is remaining bullish on Tesla in the short, medium, and long term here. But again, we also have to take into account what their new vehicle sales have actually been like, especially in Europe here. The latest data confirms that similar declines are continuing for Tesla in Europe, in Belgium, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, and other markets, with Norway actually seeing some pretty aggressive increases here. So Europe still remains a problem right now for Tesla in the short term, but having Elon Musk stepping away from Doge and putting more of his focus, time, and energy into Tesla is what investors are going to be looking towards to actually turn this ship around here and get Tesla moving back in the right direction. Now, going along with our electric vehicle theme here, let's briefly talk about NIO, another one that you guys are very interested in. Again, we are holding right now at the bottom area of this range of support that is held pretty strong with NIO over the last couple of months here. But again, something that I say a lot with NIO, I've said it before, I will say it again, they really need to start delivering with all of the over-promising and under-delivering that they have really been giving to the market over the last couple of years here. Now is the time that they really need to get serious and start hitting some of the goals that they have outlined for investors. Now, they did recently have a pretty average earnings report, nothing crazy out of the ordinary, wasn't the best, wasn't necessarily the worst, but seeing news like this over here, NIO to supply batteries to McLaren, the battery pack will be based on NIO's in-house developed 4680 large cylindrical battery cells with small scale production expected to begin next year. NIO will also restart R&D on the 46105 large cylindrical battery and 120 kilowatt hour battery pack in collaboration with 47. Now, this is a positive development, again, for NIO having this type of partnership, but what they need to be very careful of is letting their R&D spend get out of control. Remember, we have heard in the past that NIO is working on cutting back on some of the bloat in their spending here, and they really need to make sure that they are going to be very, very efficient with all of the money that they are going to be putting into these new endeavors to hopefully generate some rate of return for investors and for the company moving forward. Now, moving on here, let's talk a little bit about Palantir, because this is a name that has been able to hold very, very well at these recent highs, especially after a little bit of a PR disaster that they had over this past week after that news and narrative started to spread that Palantir and the United States government were teaming up to surveil United States citizens and also create a database on a lot of these US citizens here. And what I will say here, guys, is, again, you got to stay out of the echo chambers. If there's positive news about a stock, you have to treat it positively. If there's negative news about a stock, you then have to treat it as such here. You don't want to be operating in the market with blinders on, because that is when you can get into trouble. Now, what I've said before about this situation here is that, again, this is not going to be affecting the revenues moving forward, but having this negative sentiment starting to spread across the board is definitely not a bullish development. And what I will say to all Palantir shareholders here, I don't think any of Palantir management watches these videos, but if they do, I do have a little bit of a message for them, and it is, please understand the audience that you are talking to when you are going out and trying to address these concerns. Having Alex Karp come out and basically just saying, oh, just read about our product, to people that maybe are not invested in Palantir or have no technological experience, because again, this can be a complex company for a lot of people to understand, is not going to kind of calm anybody's fears here. You are talking to normal, everyday citizens that are concerned about their data. So again, you got to make sure that you are talking to these people and getting your points across in a way that everybody can understand, so they can get over this hump and continue operating the way that they want to moving forward here. But again, like I've said, I don't really think this is going to affect their revenues, but having that negative sentiment is definitely not something positive for the stock moving forward. Now, the last name that I want to talk about with you guys as we wrap up this video here is Sofi. Now, while there's not any crazy pieces of news coming out with Sofi in the short term here, what we do see here is a very, very bullish short-term chart setup here. Again, the daily has really good structure here, but when you take a look at Sofi on a weekly time frame, this is a textbook bullish breakout setup here. If we can get above that weekly high here of about, let's say, 1477, this one could start moving very, very quickly up to that 1516 area here as we get closer to that earnings report coming out in the beginning of August here, which is most likely going to show a lot more user growth. And by then, we could easily see some more positive developments with Sofi on the new crypto offerings that they are working day and night. Again, those are Anthony Noto's words, the CEO of Sofi, to get re-released to the public here in all of the users of the Sofi platform, which could not only just increase user growth here, but also average revenue per customer, which is definitely something that the market is going to be looking at with Sofi in order to give it the valuation that we all think it's going to deserve in the future here. So that is going to wrap up this video, guys. Again, if you did enjoy the information and analysis that I provided for you guys in this video here, make sure you go down and hit that like button. Costs you nothing to do it, but it helps me out a whole lot in spreading this information out to as many people who actually want to learn. And again, if you never want to miss another video like this, make sure you're subscribed, turn on notifications so you're notified every time these videos do end up getting posted live. And for those of you guys that are taking that right step forward and hopping into the Less Trades, More Profits community with us, congratulations. We're going to get you going in the right direction. But until next time, guys, I will see you. Peace.